Hello students, welcome to the program. The topic selected for the program is Psychological Basis of Human Mental Life, Functions of Human Nervous System. The objectives set for the present lecture are to have an understanding of the nervous system, to understand the role played by nervous system in human body, and lastly, to understand the psychological basis of human mental life with special reference to human nervous system. First, the nervous system. The nervous system is the part of an animal's body that coordinates its actions and transmits signals to and from different parts of its body. Nervous tissue first arose in worm-like organisms about 550 to 600 million years ago. At the cellular level, the nervous system is defined by the presence of a special type of cells called the neurons, also known as a nerve cell. Neurons have special structures that allow them to send signals rapidly and precisely to other cells. They send these signals in the form of electrochemical waves traveling along thin fibers called axons, which cause chemicals called neurotransmitters to be released at junctions called synapses. A cell that receives a synaptic signal from a neuron may be excited, inhibited, or otherwise modulated. The connections between neurons can form neural circuits and also neural networks that generate an organism's perception of the world and determine its behavior. Along with the neurons, the nervous system contains other specialized cells called glial cells or simply glia, which provide structural and metabolic support. First, the neurons. The human brain consists about 100 billion neurons. A neuron consists of a cell body axon containing the nucleus and special extensions called as dendrites. Neurons communicate with each other using axons and dendrites. When a neuron receives a message from another neuron, it sends an electric signal down the length of its axon. At the end of the axon, the electrical signal is converted into a chemical signal, and the axon releases chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are released both into the space between the end of an axon and the tip of a dendrite from another neuron. Neurons can be distinguished from other cells in a number of ways, but their most fundamental property is that they communicate with other cells via these spaces, that is synapses, which are membrane-to-membrane junctions containing molecular machinery that allows rapid transmission of signals, either electrical or chemical. Many types of neurons possess an axon, a protoplasmic protrusion that can extend to distant parts of the body and make thousands of synaptic contacts. Axons frequently travel through the body in bundles called nerves. Even in the nervous system of a single species, such as humans, hundreds of different types of neurons exist, with a wide variety of morphologies and functions. Then the glial cells. Glial cells, named from the Greek form glue, are non-neuronal cells that provide support and nutrition, maintain homeostasis, form myelin, and participate in signal transmission in the nervous system. In the human brain, it's estimated that the total number of glia roughly equals the number of neurons, although the proportions vary in different areas. Parts of the nervous system. Invertebrates' nervous system consists of two main parts: the central nervous system (CNS) and the peripheral nervous system (PNS). The CNS contains the brain and spinal cord. The PNS consists mainly of nerves which are enclosed bundles of long fibers or axons that connect the CNS to every other part of the body. The spinal canal contains the spinal cord, while the cranial cavity contains the brain. The CNS is enclosed and protected by the meninges, a three-layered system of membranes, including a tough, leathery outer layer called the dura mater. The brain is also protected by skull and the spinal cord by vertebra. The vertebrate nervous system can also be divided into areas called grey matter and white matter. Grey matter contains a high proportion of cell bodies of neurons. White matter is composed mainly of myelinated axons and takes its color from the myelin. White matter includes all of the nerves and much of the interior of the brain and spinal cord. Grey matter is found in cluster of neurons in the brain and spinal cord and in the cortical layers that line their surfaces. Dear students, let's understand the role of nervous system in human body. At the most basic level, the function of nervous system is to send signals from one cell to others or from one body part to others. There are multiple ways that a cell can send signals to other cells. One is by releasing chemicals called hormones into the internal circulation so that they can diffuse to distant sites. In contrast to this broadcast mode of signaling, the nervous system provides point-to-point signal neuron project their axons to specific target areas and make synaptic connections with specific target cells. This neural signaling is capable of much higher level of specificity than hormonal signaling. It's also much faster. The fastest nerve signal travels at speed that exceeds 100 meters per second. At a more integrative level, the primary function of nervous system is to control the body. It does this by extracting information from the environment using sensory receptors, sending signals that encode this information into the central nervous system, processing the information to determine an appropriate response and sending output signals to muscles or glands to activate the response. The evolution of a complex nervous system has made it possible for various animal species to have advanced perception abilities such as vision, complex social interactions, rapid coordination of organ system, and integrated processing of concurrent signals. In humans, the sophistication of the nervous system makes it possible to have language, abstract representation of concepts, transmission of culture, and many other features of human society that would not exist without the human brain. Now, dear students, let's understand nervous system and human behavior. Historically, for many years, the predominant view of the functions of nervous system was as a stimulus response associator. In this conception, neural processing begins with the stimuli that activate sensory neurons, producing signals that propagate through chain of connections in the spinal cord and brain, giving rise eventually to activation of motor neurons and thereby to muscle contraction, that is, to overt responses. Descartes believed that all of the behaviors of animals and most of the behaviors of humans could be explained in terms of stimulus response circuits, although he also believed that higher cognitive functions such as language were not capable of being explained mechanistically. Charles Sherrington, in his influential 1906 book, The Integrative Actions of the Nervous System, developed the concept of stimulus response mechanism in much more detail, and behaviorism, the school of thought that dominated psychology through the middle of 20th century attempted to explain every aspect of human behavior in stimulus-response terms. However, experimental studies of electrophysiology beginning in the early 20th century and reaching high productivity by 1940s showed that the nervous system contains many mechanisms for generating patterns of activity intrinsically without requiring any external stimulus. Neurons were found to be capable of producing regular sequences of action potentials or sequences of bursts even in complete isolation. When intrinsically active neurons are connected to each other in complex circuits, the possibility for generating intricate temporal pattern becomes far more extensive. A modern conception views the function of the nervous system partly in terms of stimulus-response chains and partly in terms of intrinsically generated activity patterns. Both types of activity interact with each other to generate the full repertoire of behavior. Now, the nervous system and human personality. The neuroanatomical construction is distinctively important as the architecture of brain assists in understanding how parts of the brain interact with rest of the nervous system and influence functional expressions, behavior and emotions. Although much of the human system is based on biological, chemical and physiological foundations that most scientists and researchers agree upon, the influence of the brain and its anatomical architecture on functions and behavior is highly controversial. Regardless of the consensus surrounding areas such as physiology, biology, and chemical reactions, there is a major debate regarding genetics and the role of nervous system in the development and change of personality. By starting with the construction and general functions of the nervous system, it will provide a foundation to dive deeper into the controversy surrounding the nervous system, specifically the brain and its role in the personality and behavior. Through the construction of human nervous system in early development, various stages occur in developing neurons in the brain. Ultimately, this is the process of producing cells or neurons, the movement and formation of neurons and glia, development of axons and dendrites, to the formation of synapses between neurons. Upon maturation of the nervous system, several perspectives begin to diverge in the scientific community, as this is the point where the nervous system sustains itself and affects cognitive functioning, learning, and behavior. It's understood that genetics plays a role in the construction and development of the human nervous system. Studies show that as humans develop through adulthood, the nervous system can have profound impact on their ability to see, hear, learn, and express emotions, among other things. Human behavior genetic research offers insight into the vast and complex connections between the nervous system and human personality. The environment also plays a role, but it is still much harder to identify the environment-specific influence on personality variation. Now, the neurotransmitters and human behavior. Dear students, dopamine is an organic chemical that plays several important roles in the brain and body. In the brain, dopamine functions as a neurotransmitter, a chemical released by neurons to send signals to other nerve cells. The brain includes several distinct dopamine pathways, one of which plays a major role in reward-motivated behavior. Most types of rewards increase the level of dopamine in the brain, and many addictive drugs increase dopamine neuronal activity. Other brain dopamine pathways are always in motor control, and in controlling the release of various hormones. These pathways and cell groups form a dopamine system, which is neuromodulatory. Several important diseases of the nervous system are associated with dysfunctions of the dopamine system, and some of the key medications used to treat them work by altering the effect of dopamine. Parkinson's disease, a degenerative condition causing tremor and motor impairment, is caused by a loss of dopamine-secreting neurons in an area of the midbrain called the substantia nigra. There is evidence that schizophrenia involves altered levels of dopamine activity. Restless legs syndrome and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are associated with decreased dopamine activity. The posterior hypothalamus has dopamine neurons that project to spinal cord, but their function is not well established. Inside the brain, dopamine plays an important role in executive functions, motor control, motivation, arousal, reinforcement, and reward, as well as lower level functions including lactation, sexual gratification, and nausea. An additional group of dopamine-secreting neuron is found in the retina of eye. These neurons are amacrine cells, meaning that they have no axons. They release dopamine into the extracellular medium and are specifically active during daylight hours, becoming silent at night. This retinal dopamine acts to enhance the activity of cone cells in the retina while suppressing rod cells. The result is to increase sensitivity to color and contrast during bright light conditions, at the cost of reduced sensitivity when the light is dim. Dopamine contributes to the action selection process in at least two important ways. First, it sets the threshold for initiating actions. The higher the levels of dopamine activity, the lower the impetus required to evoke a given behavior. As a consequence, high levels of dopamine lead to high levels of motor activity and impulsive behavior. Low levels of dopamine lead to torpor and slowed reactions. Parkinson's disease, in which dopamine levels are greatly reduced, is characterized by stiffness and difficulty initiating movement. However, when people with the disease are confronted with strong stimuli, such as a serious threat, their reactions can be as vigorous as those of a healthy person. In the opposite direction, drugs that increase dopamine release, such as cocaine, can produce heightened levels of activity, including at the extreme psychomotor agitation and stereotyped movements. The second important effect of dopamine is a teaching signal. When an action is followed by an increase in dopamine activity, the basal ganglia circuit is altered in a way that makes the same response easier to evoke when similar situation arises in the future. This is a form of operant conditioning in which dopamine plays the role of a reward signal. In the reward system, reward is the attractive and motivational property of a stimulus that induces approach behavior and consummatory behavior. A rewarding stimulus is one that has the potential to cause an approach to it and a choice to be made to consume it or not. Pleasure, learning, for example, classical and operant conditioning, and approach behavior are the three main functions of reward. As an aspect of reward, pleasure provides a definition of reward. However, while all pleasurable stimuli are rewarding, not all the rewarding stimuli are pleasurable. For example, extrinsic rewards like money, The motivational or desirable aspects of rewarding stimuli is reflected by the approach behavior that they induce, whereas the pleasurable component of extrinsic reward is derived from the consummatory behavior that ensues upon acquiring them. A neuropsychological model which distinguishes these two components of an intrinsically rewarding stimuli is the incentive salience model, where wanting or desire, less commonly seeking, correspond to approach behavior, while liking or pleasure corresponds to consummatory behavior. In human drug addicts, wanting becomes dissociated with liking as the desire to use an addictive drug increases, while the pleasure obtaining from consuming it decreases due to drug tolerance. Within the brain, dopamine functions partly as a global reward signal, where an initial phasic dopamine response to a rewarding stimulus encodes information about the salience, value, and context of a reward. While dopamine has a central role in mediating wanting associated with the approach behavioral response to the rewarding stimulus, detailed studies have shown that dopamine cannot simply be equated with liking or pleasure as reflected in the consummatory behavior response. Dopamine neurotransmission is involved in some but not all aspects of pleasure-related cognition. Dear students, we may conclude that the neuroanatomical construction has a vital and important influence on human behavior. The architecture of brain acts as a roadmap to assist in understanding how parts of the brain interact with the rest of the nervous system and influence functional expressions, behavior, and emotions. With genetic and environmental factors still being researched, it's difficult to separate these factors, and clinical studies will require more intensive technology, resources, and dedicated scientists to solve this mystery. But since we know that the nervous system does play a role in human behavior and that the environment can disrupt the normal development of the nervous system, perhaps cracking the code may not be too far in future. Dear students, I hope you understood the content and enjoyed the program. Thanks for watching.